What's going on, guys? We are back with another episode of What the
Shell.
Podcast. It's an exciting night, and this is actually a guest that I had never formally talked to. I don't believe Ed had either, but it was something that we'd been following on social media for a while. Those that know us know that we both have a profound love for the Diamondback Terrapin species.
Yeah.
And so it was a no-brainer that I wanted to get their message out, get them involved, and get them on the podcast.
Yeah, no doubt.
Do you got anything you want to say, Ed, before I go ahead and add her?
No, I mean, honestly, other than the fact that, I'm excited to hear from a perspective of um, someone that's been doing it so long and very impactful, not just in the line of work she does, but also, with the community and people she involves also. I mean, I think going forward, with things that are going on with the terrapin laws down here in Florida and stuff like that, I mean, I think it's vital for people in this realm and field that's been doing it as long as like she has, that those voices be heard and realize that there are ways around what we can do to establish the betterment of this species for the long haul.
Right.
Not to get too in detail with laws and all that, but I think these kind of things, to be able to educate and get people knowledgeable, what's at stake, and ways that there are not around, but just things that are to be aware of. Because we all love our animals, and the last thing we want to do is um, you know do anything that's going to hurt them in the long haul. And also,
Right.
we just want to keep our animals, for the most part, for the ones that are really enthusiastic about it, whether it's educational programs or whatever you might have it. So I'm excited to see and hear her perspective, and yeah, I'm ready to dig in.
I got to admit, before we get started, the one thing that I was most surprised about when I got the bio was that it said they had released over 5,000 terrapins, and that number, like, it made my heart warm. Like,
Yeah.
knowing that there's organizations out there that are doing it. And I say that because if we think back to the podcast we had with Jordan Gray, where he said in Georgia and South Carolina, where he's at, he's seeing, what did he say, like 300 females, adult egg-laying females a year dying on the causeways. And so knowing that somewhere, these things are also being done. And I know Jordan Gray and them, they had started a good majority of hatchlings as well. But, like, knowing that there's some good going on is definitely, a plus for this species.
Yeah, and honestly, I think it's going to be enlightening knowing the fact that, you don't have to be just like this podcast, man. We're on here just conversating and getting people on here that love what they do and where they're at. And I think letting people know that they can be involved and be actively, and they don't need to have a degree. They don't need to have this. All they got to have is the love and passion pursuit to, you know, love the animals that they're passionate about, and make a difference so that they can make a difference. So.
No, for sure. Let's go ahead and add her. So, guys, tonight our guest is Kathy Lacey. She is the CEO of the Terrapin Nesting Project. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and add her to the stream.
Hi
Kathy.
there. Thank you. I appreciate it.
How are you?
Good.
No, thank you. We're glad you agreed to be on our podcast. You have a million other things you could do tonight, but you chose to be here with us.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
We are so grateful because, like you said, giving a platform for, what you do, and knowing that people can make a difference, and obviously we're to be in it for the long haul for future generations is key. So
right. Kathy, can you go ahead and tell the people that are watching a little bit about yourself and a little bit about the Terrapin Nesting Project and how this all came to be?
Okay. I'm obviously a wife and a mother and a very devoted conservationist. By trade, I'm a teacher. I taught environmental science for 30 years. I've always had animals, and they were part of my lessons. I would bring them in. It was nice sensory touch, and the kids really got a lot out of it. I grew up on Long Beach Island. My dad was in the service. When he retired, we moved to Long Beach Island. He took his last base at Fort Dix. When I moved to Long Beach Island, it was just a beach. It was just sand. There was very little development. And at that time, I was very young, and you could actually go down in the spring and see the terrapins come up and nest in the sand. I mean, there was beach all over the place, Bay Beach. And then you just stick a marker where the nests were and come back 60 days later after the summer. You'd play on the beach all summer long, come back, and you'd see the hatchlings emerge.
That's awesome.
Talk about getting hooked. That's how you get hooked. I married 36 years ago and moved to Pennsylvania, where my husband lives. But we always went down to the shore. My family's down there, so we always went down to visit at the shore. And in 1984, they had a building moratorium. So you really couldn't destroy the beaches. You couldn't build on the beaches. In 1984, they lifted the building moratorium. And at that point, builders came out of the woodwork. And the Bay beaches were wiped out, basically. Multi-million-dollar homes, docks, bulkheads, you name it. And then the terrapins really started having issues. So in 2009, I had cancer. And it was not, I made it through the cancer, and I was thinking of doing something else. I wanted to give back thing. So I was online one day, and I've always been a member of the Sierra Club, and they had this little program on there, a little contest. Just tell what you could do to save the waters or to do something to the waters, the bay or the ocean. And they would send you to Washington for this Blue Vision Summit, a 5-day summit in Washington. I really wanted to go. They were picking 5 people from the country. So I said to my husband, can you live without me for 5 days? He said, why? And I told him, he said, yeah, go ahead, knock yourself out. So I did. I wrote this little summary that I would start this terrapin nesting project. And they took me. The next day I got the word that I was going to Washington.
The very next day?
The very next day. Yeah, it didn't take long. The very next day. So I went down, and that was in 2011. When I got back, I had to put my money where my mouth was. And so I started this very small hatchery. My husband and I built it, just a small little wire enclosure. And that summer we had, I think it was 237 eggs, because I started late in the season, and 225 of them hatched. It was wonderful. The community jumped on board. And the next year I came back, and one of my volunteers had built me 2 hatcheries to put the eggs in. That year we had 1,000. And it just kept snowballing and snowballing and snowballing. My whole concept when I started was, I've seen other conservation groups up and down the coast. I'm a teacher, and I believe if you educate people, they're your best bet. And so I opened this up to the community, and I taught them, and I educated them. When is terrapin season? What do you do when you see a terrapin? How do you mark a nest when you see one so I can pull the eggs? The community just jumped on board. Long Beach Island has the most phenomenal people there. And to date, we have probably released 23,000 hatchlings, 5,000. Actually, it's not just 5,000. If I actually count the numbers I'm going to release next week, with my whole gate and my Barnegat Light area, we probably released 6,000 hatchlings this summer.
Wow.
This is all because of the community. Community. Now, it takes a little bit of juggling with Fish and Wildlife to get them to give you a little bit of leeway so you can have other people come in and help you. But I'll tell you something. The community loves the turtles. They didn't, when I started this, they said, what turtles? And once I started teaching them about it, all of a sudden they saw turtles all over the place. You have to make them aware. And once they're aware, they're on board.
Right.
And this is what has really made the project move forward. The community knows when to slow down. If anybody in the area ever was unrecognizable and they picked up a turtle, there's no poaching in my area. Those people would be all over them. They'd probably lynch them. We have no poaching. We have very little, maybe 2 or 3 vehicular mortalities in a season.
Wow.
That's phenomenal.
Right.
Yeah.
And you don't even have, you can have signs up and down the road saying turtle crossing, but unless it's here and here, it doesn't matter. You ignore it.
That's good.
Right.
So education is the key to saving a species.
Come on.
And it's
Preach
worked.
it. Preach it.
Yeah, it's really worked. I mean,
No, it's funny you say that, because I think about myself, at least I'm in a pretty wooded area of Florida, up in North Florida, and we have bear crossing signs and deer crossing signs. And I can legit say I don't see a single person slow down when a deer crossing sign is out. And you hit it. Like, you see it and you're like, okay, there might be some deer. But nobody like takes that cautionary step to, hey, let me be more cautious until, like you said, it's here and here, you know, like
the signs blend into the background.
Right.
But when you have it in your heart and when you know what's going on, you don't need a sign. You know the season, you know what you have to do. And the whole community and everybody that goes down there, I mean, it's terrapin season. They know it. It's terrapin season. Slow down. When we have a terrapin crossing a bay road to get to a sanded area, you'll see 6 cars, 3 on both sides, stop. And they run out of their cars, and everybody wants to pick up that terrapin to help her across the road. It's comical. It's absolutely comical. And this year, where many people had issues with their projects, et cetera, because the Sierra Club has continued to fund me. And a lot of the projects they fund have not been able to get off the ground this year because of the COVID virus. However, we actually benefited from it because there were people on Long Beach Island from April on. They had nothing to do. We were the entertainment. These people spent their days walking up and down those bay beaches looking for terrapins. And as soon as that female put her foot on the sand, she was scooped up and put on a nesting site. So we didn't miss anybody.
That's interesting. Can you explain what you mean? Like, do you have special areas where you have them nest, or?
Yeah. That is also thanks to the community. In 2011, when I started, I just had a small hatchery site. The following year, I had 2 big hatcheries that were built for us to move eggs. So we transported eggs from unsuitable areas. What they did when they built all the places down there is they took away the sand and they filled it in with this clay substrate. So the females would come up and nest because they've got really strong. But this clay substrate in many people's yards, they're landscaping. Once it rains, it starts to get really hard. But terrapins are ready to hatch. It's so hard, it's like concrete, and they can't get up. So if they're not predated, they're buried underground. So our goal was to teach the locals how to spot a terrapin nesting, how to mark her behind her shell once she started to lay her eggs, because she goes into a trance and you can do cartwheels and she doesn't care. So you mark behind her and then call us, cover it with a bucket and call us, because the crows are big predators down there. And in doing so, we would take those eggs and move them to the hatchery. My goal was always to have it a more natural setting. So in 2016, one of my volunteers surprised me and just dumped sand on her property. Now, it wouldn't have worked unless she had already been a nesting site, and we had pulled a lot of nests from her area. So she dumped sand on it, and that was our first nesting site, our first natural nesting site, and it's right across from the bay. There's a bay road in between, but it's right across from the bay. So this is what we've done. This is really, I mean, I'm just going to share this with you. It's something I never thought about before because I've been working with turtles for many, many years. When somebody sees a turtle crossing across that bay road, we can actually pick this terrapin up and put her on the sand instead of where she was planning to go and kind of redirect her navigation. 90% of the time, she will nest when we put her on the sand.
Okay.
So we have now 3 sanded areas, 2 large ones and 1 small one that people have donated to us and put sand on. These are natural nesting sites. We don't touch the eggs. The females nest there, and then we process the females after they're finished, and we cover the nest with baskets for safety purposes against predation.
Right.
But we don't touch the eggs. And that's even better when you don't put your hands in it because it's all natural. Once you get this female on this nesting site that maybe she wasn't headed for, but now it's she smells the sand, she likes the sand better, she nests there. The second time she comes back, she's going to go there.
That's what I was going to ask next.
Yeah. I've never known another turtle that you can actually pick up when they're going to nest and put someplace else without them kind of saying, goodbye, guys. She nests. She actually does drop her eggs there. And so they come back to the places we've changed their navigation, which is to me so incredible.
Wow. Yeah, for generational purposes, like you said, I mean, you're redirecting their instincts, I mean, so to speak, to a safe zone, which is
exactly.
Wow. That's incredible.
And then what happens is we leave them once they hatch out of the nest. When nesting season comes along, we wrap the areas, the safe areas, the sanded areas, with wire so the hatchlings can't get out across the road. Okay. So we have our hands in this. And that's where I had to go one up with the Fish and Wildlife to tell them this, we're going to do a lot more than you're expecting us to. When they hatch, we take them, we hydrate them in fresh water for 24 hours, and then we release them. Now, every other year except this year, we had the luxury of doing an adopt-a-nest, which was Jill Snyder, one of my volunteers. It was her baby. We would sell a nest. People would donate $50 and buy a nest. And when they hatched, they would come out to the marshes with us. And we'd put babies, little hatchlings in everybody's hands, and they'd release them. You want to talk about getting somebody hooked on turtles?
No,
You
I'd
could-
be hooked.
That's it.
I'd buy a plane ticket from Florida.
We have people coming from California that
Wow.
would ask us when they were going to start hatching just to come and do the adopt a nest.
Right.
This year, obviously, we had to do that virtually. We couldn't do it, in person, but they still supported us.
Wow.
So we've taken this whole community and we have just pulled them in. And
Wow.
when everything else was like, there was nothing else to do on the island except for us. From April, May, and on, we were the entertainment. And we had a phenomenal season. And where normally I think we would have probably missed 35% of the nests that come out, they would have been predated or just forgotten, or they would have been buried alive underneath. We got every single female because there wasn't a female that got out of that bay water without somebody scooping her up and sticking her on the sand. And that's why we had such an increase in hatchling numbers.
So let me ask you this question: this hatchery, you said you wrap it in wire, when it's hatching time. But
now,
like after, yeah.
After nesting, yes, during hatching time.
So during nesting, is it just? I mean, I'm envisioning like just an open part of a beach, and anybody can just set the turtle there.
You got that right, and they do.
Okay.
And sometimes, even if somebody's not around, like if one of our volunteers aren't around, I will get calls from the locals from the community saying, I just put a female on your nesting site. I'll sit here and wait till she drops her eggs and then I'll cover her with a basket. This is how involved our community is.
That's awesome.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's almost like I'm kind of translating into the sea turtle thing down here, how like massively, like, it's like, golly, it's like sea turtles are not the only turtle, so it's, wow, it's just,
they are so involved.
It's
You've got to really get the community involved. I know many conservation areas think only the scientists can do this. You know what? You can educate people. And as a teacher for 30 years from environmental science, I know you can educate people.
Right.
And I'm not asking that. We do all the processing, we do the chipping, we do everything else. Nobody else gets to touch them on that. But you can certainly tell them, this is terrapin season. This is where she goes if she's crossing the road so she doesn't get hit. Put her on the sand. And if nobody's around and you're watching her nest, stay back so she doesn't get freaked out. When she starts dropping her eggs, keep an eye on her and then cover the nest with the basket. And we have these really nice baskets that I designed that are safe from the fox, the raccoon, and the crow. And
are those the three main predators that you guys? Are those the three main predators that?
Yeah, they really are. They really are. Raccoon were initially the worst predation, but then the fox got really smart because the local people down here also, they have a tendency, they have feral cats.
Okay.
Because they think the cats keep the rat population down, which there never really was a rat population, but that's them. They neuter them, they release them, etc. So they put out food for the cats. The fox eat it. The fox become very acquainted with people, and they're just not afraid of you. Now the fox can dig down 18 inches. So you got to sink these baskets, and that's what we do. We trench them when we sink them. So when they hit the basket, they just kind of give up and they walk away. The crow, when I started the project in 2011, first of all, when I grew up down here, there really weren't American crows. They were the fish crows, the smaller crows, and they would pick up an occasional egg. But the American crow is so smart. They teach everybody else. They teach all the other crows what we're doing. And they will actually follow the female out of the water and sit behind her and pull the eggs out of the ground. So, yeah.
That's insane.
It is insane, but I guess they have to eat too.
Yeah.
So these cages also have the netting on top. We have monofilament on top of our nesting sites, so the crows can't go down there because it does scare them. They won't go down.
Okay.
So those would be our three main predators because we really don't have a poaching issue.
Right.
Wow. Yeah. That's incredible.
Yeah, it is.
So how did you are you retired now, and then like once you started the project, or were you still teaching and then kind of slowly?
When I had the cancer, I was still teaching, and I was going through the chemo and wearing wigs and everything else. And then, I'd done it a long time and I really enjoyed it, but I just wanted to do something different.
Yeah.
And this is what I do. Now I will teach this. I do go throughout areas and I give presentations, and I have a couple of schools that work with me to head start them. But I'm kind of retired from basic teaching at this point. But see, once a teacher, always a teacher.
Yeah. That's
So,
my wife. My wife's a high school teacher at Martin County High School too. So it's in her blood. And her dad's been teaching for 30 years. So it's like
it's
I'm an elementary school teacher, so
really? I
Yes,
taught
ma'am.
K through 6. I taught K
Okay.
through 6.
I teach
Because
fourth grade right now.
I love young kids. They're not jaded.
yeah.
They're
That's
not
one
jaded
thing I
yet.
love. When I bring the animals in, I mean, you can just, their faces light up and you hit them when they're young and it's game over. I know that's how it started with me. And that's why I even pursued a degree in wildlife management and wanted to even do something a little bit beyond the hobby. And so with the Terrapins, did you just kind of learn, early on, just, you mentioned, you used to see them and you just kind of gradually kind of educated yourself, or did you do some research?
Well, I also married a turtle man.
Okay.
I also married a turtle man. When I was growing up, I was an Army brat. So we really couldn't have a lot of animals. We had dogs and we had some cats because we traveled a lot.
Oh. You froze.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
Good.
Okay.
The last thing we heard was you had cats and dogs because you traveled a lot.
Yeah, we had cats and dogs. So I wasn't allowed to have other things because we were always on the road. We were over in Europe. We were every place. In 1984, when I met my husband, and I asked him to marry me, he asked me if I liked turtles. And I said, well, of course I do. He said, good, because I have some. And that was kind of like it. I mean, I've learned, I can teach myself a lot of stuff, and I knew the Terrapins from when I was growing up. But I'm married to an encyclopedia of turtle knowledge.
We might need to get him on the podcast too one day.
Yeah, you should. He's one of these kids that got golden books when he was little and knew the Latin names of everything by the time he was 6. So whatever I didn't know, I had somebody to go right to.
Wow. Okay.
So we worked as a team, like Chris and Casey. Yes.
Yeah.
So
I'm curious, and I mean, you don't have to dive into this, but what kind of turtles does he keep, or are his favorites?
His favorites are map turtles.
Well, I mean, that's a good relationship.
There's the cousin. There's the cousin of the Terrapin.
Yeah.
The closest relative of the Terrapin. So you can learn a lot about Terrapins just by knowing map turtles. We also keep tortoises.
Okay. I was gonna ask because your email was tortoises, XYZ.
I couldn't get turtles. There was somebody else who had K turtles. So I went with K tortoises. But we have redfoot tortoises. We have Ellies and elongate. We have sulcatas. We just turned our Burmese browns over to Chris Leone.
Okay.
Because he has more space, he has more room, and he's a hell of a lot younger than us. So he's got many, many years to live with them. We're just trying to cut things down a little bit because sometimes it gets out of hand.
Right.
All of our turtles seem to propagate. I mean, we have right now, I think, 18 hatchlings, redfoot hatchlings, just from this winter, because you can't not dig up an egg. You can't not incubate an egg.
Yeah.
Right.
It would be a crime. If they're going to drop them, you're going to hatch them.
So what kind of incubation do you use? I think
We have a room. We have a whole room.
Okay.
For incubation, that's the right temperature, and that's all Tom's. I don't do any of that stuff. He does that. He also does all the aquariums, cleaning. When I bring home hatchlings at the end of the summer to overwinter, Tom's in charge of getting them to eat, raising them up, and I take the credit.
So what was his profession?
He's in the body shop business, but his heart is, he's a herpetologist at heart. He always has been. And he knows a lot. He's very well read. He's very, he's self-trained, and he has been since he was about 4 years old.
Wow. That's
so
So that just goes to show you, it's like, I think we've talked to, Anthony from Turtle Room a while ago, and he said, look, you can do whatever you want, whether it's your hobby on the side or whether it's your career choice. I mean, you're gonna find a way and navigate whatever it is that you love to do, and you're gonna pursue it in whatever line that is.
Definitely.
So. I have a question for you. You mentioned that at the end of the summer you overwintered some Terrapins.
Yes.
Are those like the last ones hatched, or like what's your process between hatching and releasing?
Right now, actually, I have some eggs downstairs in the incubation room because we kind of closed up the season. All of our volunteers went away. There was nobody really to oversee the areas. So I had to pull a couple nests, and they were probably dropped. The eggs were probably dropped at the end of July, like 7/29. And so I had to bring them home and incubate them. Now those will go back. Some of the ones I picked to overwinter actually are some of the smaller ones. And here's something that I've noticed in the last couple of years.
Smaller nests?
Well, smaller hatchlings.
Okay.
Here's the deal. When I first started this project in 2011, I could almost guarantee that every female that came up to nest was probably 10 years old. They were good, healthy, big females. Not anymore. With the change in the climate, with what they're putting in the water, with everything else, just like teenage girls, these turtles are starting younger. And in the last couple of years, I'm serious.
To teenage girls.
Just like in the last, see, this is my perspective. As a non-professional herpetologist, this is my perspective.
Yeah.
These turtles, and I know they're mine, are coming up from the first couple of years that we did this. And I'm seeing 7 and 8 year olds coming up to nest. These are small girls. Often they will have 12, 14 eggs, but they're very small. So instead of quarter-size hatchlings, you're looking at dimes.
Wow.
I am not going to put those in the water.
Right.
Those I will try to head start, and they
Those
can
are
get to
fish
a nice
food.
big size. They look like too much like appetizers to the fish and the crabs, so I won't do that.
Yeah.
Right.
You head start them big enough so that they are large enough. I got really itty bitty chips, like smaller than rice. And those are the ones, the head started turtles, I am starting to chip.
Okay.
Because I would like to have a scientific way of actually saying what my survival rate is. And the only way I'm going to do it is to be able to chip my hatchlings. And I can't chip the little guys. I've got to chip the overwintered ones.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, what would you consider the smaller size females that are coming up, like size inches wise, like
probably 7 inches.
7 inches.
Yeah, 7, 8 inches, and
what are the big girls that you're referring to?
10 inches.
Wow.
10 inches?
Yeah. Yeah.
Ooh,
That's
golly,
insane.
man.
So, think about the difference there. I mean, there really is. There's a difference, and I know that it's a couple of years there.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you can also.
And now you're talking in wild specimens; they grow at a slower rate too. So I mean,
exactly
that 10-inch female that is an older.
Yeah, because I mean, I got my big mama. She's 6 years old, and she's pushing over 8 1/4, and she's massive. I could imagine a 10-inch.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, the first couple of years, pretty much all we had were the 10-inchers. And that was it. And now I'm seeing all of these smaller girls coming up. So I can only guess that they've got to be younger girls. And I know that from our first couple of years that we've been doing this, there are returns.
Yeah. I'm curious. You talked a little bit about incubation. When you bring the nest in, do you incubate for a certain temperature or?
When I pull a nest, I pull it in exactly the same order it was dropped.
Okay.
Because I don't want to mess with the mom one. I think the females know what they want.
Okay.
And if she's looking for male, she's going to drop them low, and female, she's going to drop them higher. So I try to completely copy what she's done.
Okay.
As far as once they get
so you guys get as specific as how deep the nest is?
Yeah, we do. We do. When we move the nest, we measure. And they've got to be dropped in reverse of what you pulled, the same depth they were. Because I don't want to mess with what she was planning.
Right.
What kind of containers do you actually use then to actually, if it's pretty far down there, what do you actually use?
Well, they're no deeper than 4.5, 6 inches at the most, ever.
Okay.
And usually what I've noticed is the size of the female, not necessarily. A lot of times the female would go as far as she can stretch with her back legs. But oftentimes I see these larger females digging shallow. And I'm thinking they're digging for females. Because I really think they do have a sense of what they want. So, and now I may just be putting too much into this, but I really don't think so. I think Mother Nature knows what is required.
No, it honestly makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and some that we never even heard that came up, honestly, and that's very, very interesting, honestly. But those are things that, someone that's been doing this so long that's actually actively involved with them naturally, that's the only way to know. And especially the fact that you're actually getting all these other people that are like, as much as we love them, we don't even get to experience that kind of stuff, which is like, you know, you're amping us up to, you know, there's got that just to let us know that there can be stuff done no matter where you're at along the coast. I mean, you can't just say, you know, ban this and then it's off limits. And well, I mean, well, then where's the education?
Right.
The education has got to be your number one thing. And the coolest thing is when I started the project in 2011, nobody knew turtles. I married turtles. So I've got a pretty good background now. But nobody that I asked to volunteer with me or had any kind of a background. They've got my background. They've got what I taught them and then what I've given them since and what they picked up on their own since then. So I'm working with girls. I'll never forget Jill Snyder, who is she's my social media woman. She's the one you talk to.
Yes, ma'am.
The first day.
No, ma'am.
No.
That's okay. I just went right over. I'm going to ignore it.
All right.
The first day that she came over to volunteer, I had open volunteers. And I guess this was about, it had to be 6 years ago. And she came over and she thought she was going to volunteer for an hour or so. She didn't know what she was doing. I mean, or what was expected of her. And it was a crazy day. We had females coming out of the bay right and left. I was driving down 20th Street, this one road that goes into Harbor Harbor where there's a lot of nesting. There's a bay on one side, a bay on the other side. And the females are crossing the road. And I'm slowing down my car, scooping up females and dropping them at her feet, just saying, hold on, we're going to take them to the nesting site. And she had never worked with turtles before. She was so cool about it. She actually did a video of these 6 terrapins trying to climb up her legs, up underneath the car and everything else. But she was so cool about it. At about 5 o'clock. Now I had her from 9 o'clock in the morning. About 5 o'clock at night, she just looked at me and said, how much longer do you think I need to be here? I kind of told my husband I'd be home for dinner. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I just took this girl for 9 hours, dragged her all over creation. But she's with me still. And she is devoted. And that's how these people get. You get them excited about something. You get this community excited about something. And you have the most devoted volunteers you would ever find. I mean, obviously, we don't pay anybody. These people are all doing this during their summer vacation. They're giving up their beach. They're giving up everything else to protect the terrapins.
Yeah.
We have a question from one of the viewers that I'd like to share. I'm going to post it up and it'll come up on the screen. It's rather long, so I'm not going to be the elementary teacher and read it to everybody.
Okay. Yeah. Absolutely. In fact, yes, absolutely. Because the younger females, no, they're not as well versed. They don't know what they're doing. The older females know the routine. The younger females really are not aware of what the roads are. That's why you have to educate the community, because they will then take care of the younger females. But some of the younger females are the ones that I see in Barnegat Light, where one of my nesting sites is. There's a bay beach, and then there's a bay road, and then there's the nesting site. We will always find some nests on the sand at the bay beach, which is dangerous because the predation is unbelievable. They never survive. The older females know to come up further. And the younger females are not really that aware of the road situation. They're also not aware of the high tide situation sometimes, because you're supposed to always see them at high tide. Baloney. These girls come out any time of the day, high tide, low tide, you name it. Some of the younger ones do not necessarily put their nest in the proper place. They will be drowned if we don't pull them.
Is that because high tide, they know that the water's not going any further?
Exactly. They're supposed to nest during high tide, so wherever they nest, they know it's safe because the water can't go over their nest. Low tide, if they come out at low tide and they just find some sand and they start digging, it's probably going to be flooded out. So I think that's the whole thing.
I never thought about that.
Yeah.
Wow. No,
I think about a lot of strange things.
I was curious about something. We had asked Casey when she was on. We asked Jordan when he was on. What are the phenotypes or the looks that you're getting from the terrapin population up there? Like, is it diverse or is it pretty much the same looks? Or
you mean patterning?
Yeah, patterning.
Oh my God. I have the most incredible variety of terrapins you've ever seen. I have really strongly patterned terrapins where they're sober. I have blue terrapins. I have plain, which would be the natural northern diamondback terrapin.
Yeah.
our terrapins run the gambit completely. From one nest, we could have probably one of the three, what I consider the major genetic factors, because I think that's what it really boils down to. There are probably three major genetic factors here, and you can see the variations in them. But
what would those three be? And
well, there's one very plain, and there's one, and that I'm talking no patterning on the plastron or the carapace.
Okay.
And then there's another one that has the dotting, and it's a little more on the scutes on the carapace. And then there's the very patterned, colorful, where you can, it looks like hieroglyphics. And they are also, they tend to be a bluer color.
Yeah.
So those, I think, are the three. Of course, they blend together. They vary. But now we have, from one nest, you can have such a variety.
Wow.
Because according to what I've learned, the female can mate with more than one guy at one time, and she can have hatchlings from several males. Promiscuous girl, isn't she? But it does add variety to the whole thing.
Yeah, and that's actually one thing I think we've kind of been dialoguing, me and Cody, a little bit about, is that aspect. So the fact that you say that is actually interesting, because I mean, we were talking about how long she can hold on, and then if maybe the percentage goes down, for each year, if from each previous male and it needs a new male to,
you know what I find interesting, we've had a couple of triple nesters this year and last year, and now that we do chip them, we can tell. And some of these girls are older, and we've been tracking them for a few years, and their numbers don't decrease. I mean, as far as I know, as far as I understand, they can propagate the whole time they're alive. They can still nest. I really haven't seen any reduction in the number of eggs. Sometimes by the third nest, if she's nesting for 3 times, she might have a few less. I mean, the poor girls had to build up that calcium, and those follicles have had to work for 3 times. That's a lot.
Yeah,
but that's about the only thing I've noticed.
Wow.
Because I know some of these girls are old.
Yeah.
And you said you can, I mean, even with the ones that you incubate, I mean, seeing them hatch out from one clutch to diversity, you've seen that actual diversity of,
oh my gosh,
from one, huh?
I have some downstairs.
Wow,
in
so
one nest, you can see the whole gambit. You can see all the various different patternings and genetic codes.
Now, can you tell, I mean, obviously, I don't know how, I mean, I think we've asked Casey and, Chris this also, as far as how many males you've actually seen, and then maybe as far as them impacting more so the female with the genetics, and whose has a stronger, is there even any kind of enlightenment?
I wish I had more track of the males, which I don't have at this point. I mean, I process the females. We don't process the males. We are so overwhelmed at this point with what we're doing that we have not really had the ability to go out there and grab the males too. And we don't know who's mating with who. So we've really got to track it back to the female. But the neat thing is, I see a lot of these genetic characteristics being passed down from the female to her hatchlings. Like we have a couple females that have, I don't know if you know what I mean by striped pants. They have obvious, if you turn them around, the rear quarters, they have what look like stripes on their, okay? I have seen that passed down to hatchlings from the female, which I think is really kind of cool.
But the whole clutch won't have it, right?
No, the whole clutch won't look alike either. Because, maybe there was a different male there, or maybe there was a more prominent gene with some than with others. I mean,
yeah, and those are. I mean, you're talking about something right there that's not just a random thing coming passed down. That's actually, when you fine tune something to that consistency, then it's a proven gene.
This is what we're doing a lot of the research on in the past 2 years. Now that we're finally chipping them, track them, and we take photographs of all the. I mean, there are days that we're so busy. We have 8 females nesting on the hatchery site, and then we'll have 6 in a tub waiting to be processed. And people are driving up in their cars and on their bicycles, dropping more females off. So we're like going crazy here. But you got to keep track of what you're doing. So they're all photographed, they're all marked, they're all noted, and they're all chipped. And if they're not already chipped, then we chip them. So we keep really stringent data on all these animals. And that's what's going to help us kind of prove a lot of some of my theories.
We have a follow-up question by the same person. It's a good question, so I'm going to post it. And it felt awkward not reading the question last time as a teacher, so I'm going to read it.
Okay.
So his follow-up question: do the younger females learn to nest in more appropriate locations, or do you think you haven't done the program long enough, tracked enough individuals to know? I'm fascinated by the learning potential. Thank you.
I think that's a good question. I'm going to start it by saying sometimes the larger females are a little more difficult to get to nest on a nesting site if you pick them up and move them from where they're going. The younger ones, the first timers, they're easy. You put them on the nesting site, they don't even question it. They smell the sand, they start with their front legs, they turn around, they dig. So I would say, yes, the newer ones are easier to really train because they haven't found a location prior to this. They haven't nested someplace else prior to this. So what you're doing is before they follow that navigation, before they follow their nesting site, you've already changed it. And yes, they will come back more easily, more readily than the older ones. The older ones, you might have to pick up a couple times and put them on the nesting site before they come back there on their own. The younger ones seem to come there once you put them there. They will return.
Oh, interesting. Now, have you noticed any kind of range of because how big is the range that you had of the sand dumpings of sand that you?
Okay, this is. I'm trying to think how big this it's probably 20 by 30.
Okay.
It's a good sized property. Maybe it's probably. I stink when it comes to sizes. I really do. It's a big lot.
Yeah.
And that was the first nesting site in 2016. One of my volunteers actually turned over her property. And then there's this other area called High Bar Harbor, which is just right down the road from Barnegat Light. And they had this small lot there that used to collect it. There were rocks and stuff, but females always nested there. And it was really a lousy area. And all the locals kept saying they didn't like it because the water would hold mosquito larvae and they were afraid of it for the kids. And I said, I can fix that. I said, I'll put sand on it and make it into a nesting site. So High Bar Harbor turned the property over to us and they gave us our second nesting site. So that
awesome.
site, yeah.
Have you noticed with like the laws, with the government and stuff that you've worked with, have they been fascinated by what you've actually been able to accomplish so much to where they've given you almost essentially the reins because of the
I have a lot more flexibility than most, I'll put it that way. With the fish and wildlife people that I work with, they know that my project depends on the community. And I can't just have the people on my permit picking up these turtles. And I've explained to them, the community is involved. If there's ever a poacher here, the community would know. So don't worry about poaching because we have no poaching issues in my area and very little vehicular mortality, if any. So I have talked to Brian and Jeanette. They're our local fish and wildlife people, and they have given me flexibility because normally you wouldn't be able to take groups of people out and give them all terrapins to drop in the water.
Yeah,
I'm allowed. I have a little bit more leeway than most people because it's proven to be so successful. And the bottom line is, I mean, I know I was a teacher my whole life, and so that's what I always fall back on. But education is the way you do this. You don't exclude people. When you exclude a community from doing something like this, they have no interest in their turtle because they're not allowed to go near it.
Right.
We have basically turned the turtle over to them.
Yeah.
This is their terrapin.
Right.
And they feel a strong responsibility to take care of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like anywhere else that you've been.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's like Cody, I mean, Cody's a prime example also, man. He loves his natives, and I love my natives too, but he loves his natives to where it's like me, like, I love my Ohio, up north natives too, but I love down here. But like, there's something that where when you feel like you're a part of something, especially when you live there, you want to be actively, openly being able to be involved as much as you can. And when someone says no, then you're like, well, okay, well, that's, it's just deterring, and it feels like you've really created a mold.
See, the thing is, what we did was when we started this whole thing, the education part was they're vital to the health of the bay's ecosystem, secondary and tertiary consumers. Now, these people have multi-million-dollar homes up and down the bay beaches and the ocean. If their bay looks crappy, their houses aren't worth it. So since we have done the project, since we have started this, people actually notice the bay looks much healthier. The eel grasses are gorgeous. All the mosquito larvae has been eaten off because of these little hatchlings that we keep releasing.
Come on.
So they're proud of this, and we tell them what heroes they are. We highlight them. And by highlighting them,
come on.
That's how you do it. You just
One thing I was thinking about is with those adopt-a-nest, I mean, for the people that are local, I know you had mentioned you have people come all the way from as far as California before, but for the people that are local, let's say I'm there, I adopt a nest, I pay my money, I get to release these hatchlings. Well, now you've created ownership because
there you go.
If it's a kid, every terrapin they see, they're going to wonder if that's one of their hatchlings.
Is that one of my hatchlings? Yes. Is that one of my hatchlings? And the kids, when they're doing it, and we videotape it, and we highlight them on Facebook, and they name all the little hatchlings. It's hysterical. I mean, you could put a hatchling in anybody's hand, from a 2-year-old to a biker to I don't care, to an ex-convict. You put that little hatchling in their hand, they melt.
Yeah.
They melt, and you now have a turtle person for life.
Right.
And that's what you have to do. If you want to save a species, you get everybody involved. You wrap them up in it. And I also do jokingly at the end of the releases, I'll say, I'm checking pockets. You better not have put it in your pockets. The whole thing is just, it's very light, but everybody knows what they're supposed to do. And they're amazing.
And you've created also an experience. I mean, that's the biggest thing. Like, you can have a class, but like when you can create an experience, I mean, those are things that you look back on. I mean, early on, those are foundation. The best thing you can do is create foundational landmark in people's lives, because guess what? They'll always come back. They'll always refer back to it, whether they see a turtle from 10 years or tomorrow,
We have people that tell us after the releasing of the hatchlings, this is the best time we've had all vacation. I'm thinking, really? And they paid for it.
Right.
So, I mean, what a wonderful feeling, because they are so involved.
It's like a theme park, but I mean, with more fun, I guess.
Well, the neat thing is with our nesting sites, these natural nesting sites, one is right on 24th Street. There's a bay road here. There's a bay over here. And a lot of people walk up and down this road. Talk about a perfect place to teach. When these girls start nesting there, people just wrap themselves around the exterior, and I just get up in my little soapbox and I just teach. And it is just and they can watch the girls dropping the eggs. They can watch them, doing their happy dance at the end, which is what we call it when she fills in her nest, because she shakes her little hips like that. And you get on a different level with these people, and you just get them so wrapped up in it that they're gonna be your followers. They're gonna be turtle people. They're gonna be terrapin lovers, and they're devoted to it.
No, you're right. I was curious about something though. Going a little backwards into something we discussed. I know at least with captive breeders, there's been a lot of discussion about split scutes.
Yeah.
On hatchlings. Is that something that you guys encounter?
I have not. I've noticed very few. Very few.
And I'm curious if you remember or not. Do you find them, the very few that you've encountered, are those the ones you've incubated or that are naturally incubated?
It seems as though the few that we've had and this is why I want to get away from this, are those that we have actually moved. Now, this past year, as I said, when we started this, we moved the nest to hatcheries. We didn't have a nesting site. Now we have several. I'm going to back away from the hatchery this year. I don't want our hands in the nests, because as climate changes and everything else, I've noticed something else. You don't have that 24 plus hours anymore before the embryo attaches. It's happening faster. They're starting to white quicker. And even the most knowledgeable person moving that nest, when they're starting to white, you have a very good chance that you've just suffocated that baby. You've just rolled over. And that's a possibility for a bad egg in a hatchery. What it'll do is it'll pull in the sarcophagus fly, which then will drop the little eggs in there and cause maggots in the nest. It doesn't happen in the natural sites. So I'm trying to back away from us actually having our hands in it. And this year, I'm going to work even closer with Fish and Wildlife, and I'm going to ask them if they will let me, a lot of the people there will let me keep the nest on their property if Fish and Wildlife will. So what I'm going to ask them is, a lot of this property has now been turned into clay substrate. It's like they're landscaping. It's horrible. So when people have a nest on their property, instead of me moving it up to the hatchery, I'm going to see if Fish and Wildlife will approve. I will go to the property. I will backfill it with sand, dig down to the eggs, backfill it with sand, and put one of my protective baskets on it, and then monitor it. But leave them where they are. I'm going to back off from pulling the eggs.
Yeah. So I say all this to get to the second point is, do you find many, or if any, adults with split scutes?
Oh yeah, we've had some. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, we've had some.
It's been a topic, and I'm sure between
Not
you and your
that
husband,
many, though. Not very many.
Nature knows. I mean,
there's
not many, and I think that's because they're all wild. I think something happens when you do breed them in captivity that I think that would make that probably more of a possibility. Yeah. The other thing we had this year, when you do have this many nests, this many hatchlings, you're going to get a few oddities. I have 3 leucistics, which I'm holding back until they're a little bigger, because right now, if you put them in the water, wow, are they visible? Wow, are they? I mean, they stand out because they're almost white. I also have 1 2-headed.
Have you posted them on your Instagram?
No, not yet. I will.
Because
I have a 2-headed.
Really?
Yeah. My husband named him Ralph and Louie. Right hand, right side and left side.
Yeah.
The problem with Ralph and Louie is they actually eat. In fact, they compete for the same food. Both heads do. But unfortunately, Ralph and Louie should have been twins, because Ralph and Louie have 2 hands in the middle of their 2 heads.
Wow.
And
2 hands in their head?
No, there's a head, and then the 2 hands in between.
Yeah, so technically, the split was almost there.
It started to split, then it stopped. But I suspect that if anything ever happened, I did a necropsy on them, I believe there would be 2 back legs in between also, because although there are only 2 showing, they're not synchronized. So when Ralph and Louie try to swim, the right leg does one thing, the left leg does another. So they're not that coordinated. So they should have split, and they didn't. But see, whenever you hatch that many, you're going to have some oddities. But they're doing fine.
And that was something that you hatched?
Yeah. Okay. Actually, they were hatched in my Holgate hatchery.
Wow.
So this is my question. Are you legally allowed to keep those, or do you release them, or how does that work? Because
I do have a part of my permit where I can hold back. I can hold back some terrapins. Because they give me a lot of leeway here.
Okay. Because there's part of me that kind of agrees with you. Like, that just sounds like, I mean, I don't know what sea predators you have, but that sounds like barracuda food to me. Like,
it is absolutely.
Like, if he's swimming 2 directions at once, like.
And now, have you noticed? Did you know, since you keep a very good track with the females and the adults, what kind of females actually laid, what they look like?
That's from my Holgate group, and she was a returning female, and she had never had any oddities before. So what I'm thinking is, we had a really hot year, okay? A hot, dry year. Well, it really wasn't that moist. At a certain point, I think some of these, depending on the extreme temperature sometimes in the nest, I think that can also turn them to leucistic. I think that can also do something like stop them from completely splitting into twins.
Were they all from that same female? The 2-head and the leucistic?
No, I had, actually 2 leucistic were from one female, and 1 leucistic was from another one.
Wow.
So, yeah.
I think it's funny that you say that, because from my understanding, that's pretty much how you get like the clown ready or sliders, is like extreme heats in the incubator type.
Exactly. Well, see, that's what it is, and that's what I think caused this. And see, I'm coming from a layman's point of view, but what I don't have as far as my herpetology degree or whatever, I have a lot of in the field experience.
Right.
So this is, and as a teacher, this is what I look at, this is what I see, and this is where I'm getting my knowledge from.
No, I mean, if there's any animal that you should keep as, an educational animal, it's definitely the 2-headed and the leucistics.
Definitely. And I mean, the leucistic are perfectly healthy; they're beauties. But my God, if you put them into a container with the other turtles,
Yeah.
Wow, they stick out like a sore thumb.
So are their shells still
They're perfect.
standard?
They're perfect. They're the scutes are perfect. There's no malformations whatsoever. Not physically, not on their shells, not carapace, plastron's perfect. The bridge is perfect. The legs and the arms are perfect. The heads, they're just leucistic.
So I just gotta ask because I know that's probably the kid in you. When you seen them hatch,
How excited was I?
what was?
Are you kidding?
I mean, did you?
I just, well, see, this is the thing. As I said, the people that I work with, all of my volunteers, they had no background. So I've taught them everything they know. And when these guys were hatched, I went nuts. And I said, they're leucistic. And the other girls looked at me like, they're what? And I said,
I don't know anybody named Lucy.
I don't know anybody. Yeah, I said, they're leucistic. And I said, so then I said, look it up, just look it up. And they looked it up and I said, see what I mean? They're void. They're void of the colorations. On their necks under here, you can see through. They're absolutely amazing. I mean,
wow.
Yeah.
That just goes to show you how amazing even nature is, you know, and just the appreciation that so many people are almost held back from. It almost feels like nowadays people are held
not
back.
on our island. On our island, in fact, we become the place to go. We're not officially in the book yet. We just became nonprofit last year, but this year was not a good year to raise funding. But people come and they say, well, we were told to come down here and check out your nesting site. And I mean, they come all the way down the island, and it's an 18-mile long island. In the summer, it could take an hour to get there plus because of the traffic. But they come just to stand there and watch us with the turtles.
Now on average, what kind of time frame do you actually put in during those? You know, I know you got some long days and during the season, but what do your days and weeks and all what it look like? Do you just go all out from morning to?
Generally, since I live in Pennsylvania, I do have a husband here. I've been doing it 10 years. He's getting a little tired of losing me in the summer. I generally go from Wednesdays to Fridays. Those are my days. And then I have the other volunteers who will take certain days to cover the different sites. Once you're there, though, forget about doing anything else. I hope you eat before you go because you're not going to get a chance. The nesting season started 11 days late this year. It wasn't until June 11th.
That's how we found out, like Jordan and all them. They all said it was late.
Well, you know, because the water was cold. And since they're brumating down here, they've got to wait till the water warms up before they even come up. So we started June 11th, and by June 12th, we had 22. Who was it? Hang up. By June 12th, we had 22 females nesting within like a matter of 3 hours on this one nesting site. Another 21 on our other nesting site. This was in 3 hours. We had over 40 nests. And now every one of these, you're processing. If they're not chipped, you chip them. You're measuring, you're weighing, you're checking out their shell, you're documenting everything. That's a lot.
Yeah. How long does it take to process one female estimated?
I'm pretty good. Couple of minutes flat.
Okay.
Some of the girls are a little squeamish about the chipping. Doesn't bother me. And some of the girls still have an issue with how to hold them because some girls still get bit. I said, you should never get bit by one. You should know how to hold them. But
right.
You know, you get bit, you learn. Okay.
Taking a chunk out of them, huh?
I can flip through it pretty fast because I've been doing it a while. So a couple of minutes and I'm done. But then it's always handy if you have a volunteer, which we couldn't have this year because of the virus. Yeah. It's always handy if you have a volunteer to write it down, to collect the data. It's much easier if you can just yell at the numbers and somebody else writes it down rather than have the turtle in this hand and you're measuring, you're weighing, and then you've got to write everything down in this hand. That slows it down.
Well, it just goes to show you, I mean, it takes a team effort. It takes a team. It takes, I mean, and you can't be a lone ranger. I mean, you can but how much more productive would you be if it was just you? And that goes back to people and community. And
this is why the community is so important. This is why we're all females on my team. Our team.
I saw a picture. It was like 5 of you. Is that?
Well, actually, there are 8 of us that are really pretty much full time. 5 most of the time, and then the other 3 we pick up when we need to. But 5, and they are. I mean, these girls. I think when they thought they were going to volunteer, they're going to volunteer an hour or 2 a day. Nah. They They get full days when they volunteer. And I don't think any of us have seen the ocean side. None of us go to the beach because we're on the bay. And when you go there, you're starting from 8 o'clock in the morning. And if you finish by dusk, you're doing well. And nobody complains. I mean, it's just sometimes I'll say, I'm really sorry, but well, this is what we do.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it's such a wonder. I mean, I got so lucky with the people that joined. So lucky. I really did.
You know, one thing I like to say is, people say, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life.
There you go.
Whatever. But what I like to say is, if you love what you do, you work twice as hard.
Of course you do.
And
then when you fall asleep at night, you pass out. You're so exhausted, but it's so nice.
Yeah.
And you can't wait to do it the next day.
Yeah, that's so amazing. And
honestly, with all the years that I've seen these hatchlings pip out, you would think by now I'd get, but every time I see one pip out, I get so excited. I still get so excited. It never gets old. I can't think of anything else that I could do that I could say, this never gets old.
Right.
Wow.
No, I think,
gosh.
we are at the hour mark.
I almost feel like we can go 8. I almost feel like we can go 8 hours right now.
I know. I could have kept going.
I will say, I did have a last question for you that I'm curious before we wrap it up, and we'll have to have you back on because you have been a total pleasure.
Yeah, like next week. Come on, man. We got
tomorrow. I'm curious about something. And that's, do you notice that the females nest more certain times of the day than others?
I would like to say we could depend on that. And no. Depends on the temperature that day. Depends on if it's really hot.
That's more of what I'm asking. Like, is there like an ideal temperature where they're like, yeah, and then there's like, no, it's too hot or too cold.
Then you also got high tide and low tide distinguishing factors.
Yeah, but they're not real cool about that. A lot of them still come up on low tide, and I'm thinking, is it high tide? No, it's not. So what are they doing here? If it's really, really hot, they don't come out much. They shouldn't, because it's just too much for them. I mean, they'll dehydrate. Before it gets really hot, earlier in the morning, and then early in the afternoon, like at that middle of the day, I'm going to say you shouldn't have too many. This year went against all rules. This year we had them first thing all the way down. And I think it's because they were late in coming out and they all had to just nest. And I think they all just kind of they hit elbows and they said, come on, guys, let's go. And they all came out at once. So normally it's got to be, when it's a little bit cooler, these 98-degree days when it's really baking hot, you shouldn't really see too many. Yeah. But
that's interesting. Yeah, we forgot to have you on. And also, do you have we'd love to see, you said you had t-shirts, right? That we can actually
we have a website as well as our Facebook page. Okay. Our website is www.terrapinnestingproject.org. On the website, you can find donate buttons, you can find out how to order t-shirts. Jill would be more than happy to mail out t-shirts. We also have a Facebook page, which is Terrapin Nesting Project, and you can get a lot of the information there too. That'll also take you to the website.
Perfect. Awesome. Yeah. I'm going to be getting mine.
Perfect. Correct. No, it's got .org.
.org.
Oh, we just became a nonprofit.
Yeah, you better fix that. You earn that.
Fix that.
Earn that. That's so amazing what you do, and it's so encouraging because honestly, I couldn't. And this is no ill will to anyone before this, but I don't think I've learned as much as I have just from this jam-packed hour, which is the 1 hour. It's like, give us another half hour, but and that's the thing where I hope that people can rewind this, because I know I'm gonna chew on this and it just things that like you would never even think about.
And I probably forgot a lot, but see,
well, that's why there's another time, another place.
That sounds good. That sounds good.
Maybe next time we'll just have you finish off, and then one of your others come on, and we can all just that'll be good.
That sounds good.
Get yourself a t-shirt, guys. Come on.
Yes, please do. Go on the website.
Adopt a nest, get a t-shirt. What other ways do you guys
Jill came up with, because we couldn't do the Adopt a Nest this year in person, she came up with, she comes up with all these fantastic fundraising ideas. She came up with this other idea to foster a female. Foster a female.
Do that.
And what we did, she really did this to the hilt too. You foster a female, and we gave names to all the females because
I
people
saw that.
you personalize it, okay? And
Yeah,
this is
you
how
got
you work
to.
with the
Yeah.
community. You personalize it. They feel like they know them.
Yeah.
When the female's nest would hatch, we take pictures of the hatchlings to go with the female. Jill sends out a birth announcement. She also sends out Jill, Lisa, the one whose property we have the stand on, is also an artist. And so she also did a picture that everybody gets in their little folder.
Come on.
So you get the birth announcement coming out. Everything is virtual but you also get some paper stuff that you can print out. So, you have birth certificates, you have birth announcements, you've got pictures of the mother, you've got pictures of the hatchlings, and people really feel tied in. They feel like that's their turtle. It's like adopt a nest. You adopt a turtle or adopt an animal at the zoo. Well, this package is even more complete than that, the way Jill has set it up.
No, it sounds like it. For somebody, for us in Florida, it's like, well, I mean, I don't know when I'll get a chance to go up there, if ever. But I mean, I can still feel like I'm there if I adopt a nest or adopt a turtle. Or
I know I will be up there.
We have people in Europe that follow us.
Wow.
And they adopt nests. They foster females.
It's amazing what the media, man. Yeah. When you utilize a tool of the media, it is literally so vital that to go outside even the realm of the community. I mean, you're talking about even Florida down here is like the most versatile of all of them, but yet, can you imagine if there was a station up where you're at here, Gulf Coast, and just something the magnitude of the impact of the species that could be helped and saved and promoted for the better, and seeing the possibilities of the full potential of that species as well.
See, I'm fortunate. I'm a turtle person. I am not tech savvy, so I surround myself with people who are tech savvy. Whenever anything comes, I'll say, "That's not me, Jill. Can you do this?" Or I've got another girl who just started the University of Maryland, Katie. She does a lot of my brochures and stuff. I just kind of tell them that's not my thing.
But that's the thing, like, having that team, like everyone has a niche and everyone has a specialty that they love. Like me and Cody, he handles certain aspects of this, and then I do the other one. Like I like the artwork part, and he does all the informational and promote. I mean, so it's like it goes hand in hand, and it takes that team to surround yourself. So yeah,
it takes a team. It takes a community,
and we can all learn. We can all learn from this, and not just even from Terrapins, but from everything else. From even this talk, and I'm excited for the next. I'm all amped up, man. I want to go.
I gotta see who we technically have on schedule. I went ahead and booked quite a few ways out. Oh, Grover Brown. That's gonna be a fun one too.
Okay, when is that?
That is next Tuesday.
Okay. I mean, all of the people you've had on, I love Jordan Gray. I love the Leones. I know them. I know them all. So that's cool. But I will follow you, and just hit me up when you need another little.
Oh, we will. We will. I'll say this: from K6 teacher to K6 teacher.
Yeah.
Before we end, I've recently been elected as the president of my local Hurt Society.
Oh.
And we are doing a art contest for kids. And so any ideas that your team might have, or you might even have for doing that would definitely be appreciated. And I say that because it seems like you guys really have a network of people who are like thinking on how to get to the community.
Yeah.
And so that's really our thinking with our artwork contest, our coloring contest, is to like get those kids now interested in these animals so that in the future they'll be allies and not somebody we have to go against, if that makes sense.
A couple of years ago, one of my winter programs, I taught at a school in New Jersey, and I did the whole program on the Terrapins. I brought some hatchlings with me and everything else. They donated a whole weekend. They raised money for us. They drew us calendars. And these were elementary kids. They made calendars for us, and all the proceeds came to us.
That's awesome.
I didn't even know about it until it happened. And I was just so touched because I gave one program, one presentation. This is what came out of it.
Right.
So,
now I have one final question, just because I know how much you put into it and just the effort, and just seeing from where you've started until now, even when it's gonna be, when you have those long days,
Yeah.
and you get home and you sit down, you just kind of you're like almost like you have those aha, just like revelation of just like I can't. You almost relive the whole entire past and from
course
the
you do.
beginning, and it's like, I mean, is that something that you just? I mean,
Yes.
I'm gonna say, keep it in the back of your mind to keep you humble and keep you pursuing and keep you
Yes.
passionate and driving on. I mean, I know that's something that, it's a little bit deeper on a deeper level, but it takes that deeper level to do what you do consistently, and
I know at the end of the day, crazy days and everything else, I'm beat. But when I'm by myself, I realize how much I'm not. And
Right.
I have so much. The people they wrap their warmth around you. And I just am so thankful for every day. It seems like somebody just goes above and beyond more than once. And that stays with you, because no matter how much you put into it, there's somebody who's not even involved, who all of a sudden becomes involved and just goes that one extra step for you. And you just look at them and say, wow, that was really cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
And they say, but this is such a neat thing to do. I wanted to help. And that is, there you go. That's it.
Well, I hope if nothing else comes of this, the people that watch this podcast will at least find it in their heart to support you guys, whether it's T-shirt, adopt an S, adopt a female,
and watch this podcast at least twice.
Yes, of course.
Because the information that you're going to gain from it, you might need to watch it twice to fully digest everything.
Yeah.
I have more, but not tonight.
Not tonight. No, we all. For those that are wondering why we're moving quickly to get off, tonight is the first presidential debate.
Yeah, I know.
And so we want everybody to be involved in the political process and have that opportunity to enjoy the debate. So without further ado, we are going to wrap it up for tonight. We had an amazing podcast. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you,
Kathy. And I'm sure this will not be the end of our friendship, relationship, and finding out how Ed and I can be involved and support from wherever we're at.
Oh, I know how to find you.
Yeah.
You have my email now.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And thank you, gentlemen. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Don't hate.
Oh, yes. No, ma'am. It went over you twice. I
got to pick up on those things, man. I'm not trying
to. Right. Yeah. Okay.
Well, thank you so much.
The viewers don't understand, but she didn't want me to say ma'am. The first thing I said was, I think it was like, good evening, ma'am. And you're like, don't call me ma'am.
Don't call me ma'am.
But yes, we appreciate you guys for watching and supporting. Next week's episode, we do have Grover Brown, which is an exciting one. If you don't know who he is, you should look him up on social media. He's a very interesting. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure he's an actual professional herpetologist.
Yeah, he is, I believe.
I believe he's a professor, if I'm not mistaken. And so the viewers requested him, and I did my due diligence and was able to get him. So we hope you guys enjoy. You guys have a great evening, and we'll see you next week. This has been another episode of What the
Shell
Podcast, and we will see you guys next week.
Peace.
Thank you, guys. Goodbye.